Welcome, everybody. Delighted that you're here. Delighted that Mansi Goel is here. And welcome to a rich conversation on interracial solidarity among women, barriers, and opportunities. And as you're joining, please put your name in the chat and where you're joining from. We would love to uh, uh, know where you're joining us from and how you're doing today as we engage in this topic. And we'd also love to hear from you. What are the barriers and opportunities that you see for interracial solidarity?
Talk to us.
Oh, hi, Michelle. Oh, I'm so glad you're here, Michelle. Michelle is someone I recently met. I'm part of showing up for racial justice squad protectors. So we are calling out to get to help members of the squad in Congress who are facing primary challengers funded by APAC. And I met Michelle on one of our organizing calls, and she's just an incredible person. I'm so glad you're here, Michelle.
Hi, Erica. I know Erica. We used to work together. Oh my gosh, it's so good to see you.
Excellent. And welcome, Joanne. Yes, squad protectors. Actually, Michelle, maybe you can put the link in case other people want to join the squad protectors effort. So I'll just introduce myself and then Mansi, introduce yourself and then we'll go.
Sounds good.
Okay. I am Karen Fleshman, she, her, hers pronouns. I am on the unceded traditional territory of the Ohlone people known as San Francisco, California. And I am the co-founder of the Interracial Sisterhood Coalition and really honored to that in accepted my invitation to come here and have this live with you today.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Karen. I'm a huge fan of yours. Since we met, but I think you particularly won my heart when I saw how avidly you protested on our behalf at the Brett Kavanaugh hearings.
Mm.
And I think you just won me over as a lifelong fan with that.
Thank you so much.
So I am always delighted to partner with you and to support you in what you're doing.
Thank you. And likewise, I remember so clearly when we first met. So this was right around the time of the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. I think it was a few months before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a white woman here in San Francisco um, called the cops on an 8-year-old Black girl for selling water without a permit and went viral as Permit Patty. And that white woman happened to be a member of um, a cannabis, women in cannabis entrepreneur group. And I did a response video to her on AJ Plus that went viral. And through that, the cannabis entrepreneur women's group invited me, and I invited a friend of mine to come in and co-facilitate a workshop. And then you were there in the workshop. And I'll never forget, because I was talking about how mad I was about all the white women serving in the Trump administration. And you said something.
Oh, yeah. I was like, girl, you're talking about white women serving in the Trump administration. Let's talk about the South Asians who are the favorite color in that administration. Because I definitely felt very keenly and painfully how South Asian, some members of the South Asian community, South Asian political leaders, had really kind of hitched their star to Trump's wagon. And it just felt like such a betrayal, and it hurt because it's not my experience of being South Asian in America, and I was like, "Well, what is going on here? Where are they coming from? Why are they doing this?" Aside from obviously, rank self-interest. So, I think that experience or that, connection to my own community and in some ways you could say the political and psychological diversity within my community, um, is very much at the heart of this conversation,
Mm,
much at the heart of what is it to be in solidarity with each other in the different identities that we inhabit. Because obviously South Asians are not a monolith.
yes, yes, and white women are not a monolith either, although many, many, many of us, uh, have really reprehensible behavior.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sure we'll dive more into it, but I'm just gonna jump right in because 'cause we're here. You know, I think the ways in which I got worn down during those 4 years of the Trump administration, um, have really changed me. I'll never forget where I was the night of the election, November 8th, 2016. I had left Google about, almost 2 years, um, yeah, almost 2 years. I left at the end of 2014, and I was working with the IRC, doing refugee resettlement work in Central Valley, California, in Modesto, and we had to change plans for what we had planned a parent-teacher conference on November 9th because it didn't feel safe for a group of 10 women in hijabs to go to a school, to a public school. It was, and I was alone in a hotel room. It was a very, very cataclysmic, obviously, as we all know, experience. But one of the things that I've been experiencing since then is just a lot more attunement to the wounding that underlies so many of our identities, so many of our racial identities and racial experiences. Um, when I think about my virtually my entire corporate career, it's part of the reason I excelled in the ways that I did or failed to excel in the ways that I failed to excel has very much to do with how I related to being a woman of color in a corporate environment. And at the time, there really wasn't language around DEI. I grew up in the 80s and it was all about the melting pot and assimilation.
Yes,
So
and then the feel good, Obama administration, and we're past that now, everything is equal, and we're all one big happy family.
yeah, and then you're like, "Wait, but it doesn't feel that way."
Mm,
My I think, approach to that dissonance, to how it felt, was to be more dissociated,
mm,
become more intellectual, more abstract, and more dissociative, and really kind of, striving for some sense of right, some sense of good in an abstract way. And my whole process, which I could not really undergo within that environment and have dived much more into since then, is been to like reintegrate heart, mind, body, and start to understand how a big part of whiteness is being decontextual, being abstract, being non-relational, and mired in some mythos of the objective observer. And so I feel like we find ourselves as racialized sisters trying to inhabit this persona, this mythic persona of the objective observer.
mhm,
And a lot of conflict comes from that. A lot of conflict then comes from who's right, who's wrong, because you got to get to a right.
mm. There's
When,
only one right way.
yeah, and solidarity is not about right or wrong. Solidarity is about connection.
Mm.
Solidarity is about liberation, you know?
Yes, and I very much, what everything you just said about disassociate completely resonates with me when I think about my 10 years working in New York City, working for the city government. showing up every day, wearing my pantyhose and reading
Yeah.
my New York Times in on the subway, reading section A and reading the metro section on the way back out, and the way that I showed up. And I often felt at that time like literally like I was a brain with a box around it, and I was
Mhm.
transporting the box from point A to point B, but there was like no integration between my emotional self, my relational self, and my brain self. The only thing that I tried to value was my brain self and figuring out what I needed to do to meet the expectations in whatever situation I was in. It was very much like a lean in type approach.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, 1000%. And I think, when I think about the barriers to interracial sisterhood, which is really the work that you're advancing, when I think about some of the barriers, it's not really one of the biggest barriers I feel within myself and see around me is an inability to have the expansiveness it takes to hold each other's trauma responses,
Mm,
traumatized responses, coping strategies that come from the wounding of living in a colonial capitalist society.
mm,
And it's it's hard because it hurts. Like the pain or wounds that I've experienced hurt inside me. And until I'm willing to open to that hurt and heal it, I have my ways of avoiding it or, managing it. And for me, a lot of that was my career, that's how I coped with it. That's how I managed it. And then the thing that I've experienced that happens is start healing it a little bit. And then the first thing I want to do is walk around and tell everyone how they're not healed.
mm.
Walk around and be like, "Oh, you're not doing that right. Oh, you know what? I see where that's coming from, and this is your insecurity, or this is how you've internalized, the patriarchy and blah blah blah."
Just ask me because I'm all good.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's just, I'm not going to say that I'm in a different place yet. I
Yeah.
am going to say that I'm in a different enough place to be able to look at that place and know it's not the only one.
Mm.
You know?
Yes, yes, and
Um,
that's also very much a form of distancing, right? Like, "Oh, I've never been like you. I'm on this totally other path now to enlightenment and liberation, and you're way back there." Like, yeah, that's not the work.
which brings me back to kind of that comment from when you and I met when I was talking about the South Asians and the Trump administration, where a shining example of this is Nikki Haley. I've spent a lot of time just feeling a lot of antipathy towards Nikki
Mm,
Haley, especially at that time, just because of just so much disingenuousness,
mm,
just bald-faced disingenuousness. And what has changed is I still don't resonate with that. I have cynicism towards it for sure. I also have a lot more empathy and compassion.
mm,
I also have a lot more of a, all right, let me just, if I step back and don't ping pong between identities and really inhabit myself. I was born in India. I was almost 10 when I came. I was raised by my grandparents there. My grandfather right now is going to be 98 years old in about a month.
mm,
So he was 21 when India was became independent.
mm,
He was a legal drinking age adult. He's older than the country of India. He was born a subject of the British Raj. So that lives in me in a very close way. And if I feel within myself what those wounds are of being Indian, having been colonized in our homeland, and then coming here, how much of the oppressor's gaze, of the colonizer's gaze towards yourself you internalize as you relate to your own identity. that you have to internalize in order to survive, let alone succeed. When I really land in that, I'm not going to judge or turn against one of my own sisters for where she's at and what she's doing. Now, I don't agree with it. I don't endorse it. I'm not backing her up, but I'm not going to shit on her.
Mm.
I understand and feel within myself the wound that is under that, you know?
That is so deep, and it's bringing to mind my childhood best friend similarly moved to the United States when she was around the same age as you. And watching her go through high school in our almost entirely white town where she was the first Jewish person, the first refugee, like literally almost the first brunette to come to our
Mhm.
town, and how she tried so hard to assimilate and to be like everybody else, and felt that intense pressure and that wound of um not being supported in developing your own identity outside of the dominant group.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it folds in on itself.
Mm,
It folds in on itself because um, it's not as though being Indian, being South Asian, is all roses, especially as a woman. Like patriarchy exists in most cultures, and most of our ancestral lineages have some version of it that is um, already in its own way toxic to a feminine and innately wild, erotic, sacred femininity, the kind that Audre Lorde stood for and spoke up about, right? Like that psyche is already oppressed in so many traditions. So there's this like ping ponging that happens where you go, well, there's ways I feel more free in America as an American than I do as an Indian woman because of the oppression that's in the Indian patriarchy. But then to come out of that and seek like an escape into American culture is very jarring. And it's taken me decades to really actually understand what's happening, which is, oh, I'm escaping that restrictive patriarchy into this culture. But in doing that, I'm relating to myself through the white gaze. And that's uncomfortable and diminishing. And also, um, also there's a way in which what am I trying to say? I lost the thread of it.
what your comments are evoking for me
Mhm.
also is the white feminism then in the United States that rejects women of color, does not, says, "Oh, we here in America are good and your cultures are bad."
Thank
And
you.
the
Yeah.
way to the way to be a feminist is to be like us and demand, higher pay and right to choose and all of these things.
Yes, that's exactly the thread of it. Thank you. That to like go and find freedom from your ancestral patriarchy into the racialized patriarchy then turns you against yourself in a certain way, right? And then I have come to realize that wow, escape is not the same as freedom.
Mm,
These are two different things, you know? And it keeps sort of swirling around the damage that we sustain when we feel the pain of being diminished. And it happens through race, it happens through patriarchy, it happens in so many different like religion, culture. There's so many different ways in which we inhabit our identity that's fractal, that when we feel pain in those ways where we're not able to be, and really even not just be, but become, to really freely explore, because we're not static entities. We're
No.
growing alive creatures, right? So that freedom to go, oh, I felt this way. This is where I was yesterday, and this is how it's changing today. And glory be, that's how we want it to be. I don't want to be frozen in time, or frozen into one facet. As that happens, we rub up against each other. And, for me, like the painful part in our current era really is how much white supremacy, how much colonialism has shaped and defined that entire journey.
Mm.
And I feel that when I think about, when I relate to what's happening between Israel and Palestine,
Mm.
I feel that when I look at, whoa, there were people. Now, I'm by no means a scholar or anything like that. This is me as an Indian American trying to approach and relate to and understand what's happening. And I'm like, wait, there were a group of people who were oppressed by white supremacy, the anti-Semitism of white supremacy that was committing genocide on their entire community. And to find safe haven from that and make a safe home from that, it was the power of white supremacy. It was a British mandate that created the partition. So the only power available was the power of white supremacy to be able to go to that land. And now here we are with Palestine, and Palestinians are experiencing genocide. And there is anti sort of Islamophobic white supremacy, that is, so it's like, it's like mirrors reflecting mirrors in the profound damage and wounding that has happened and continues to happen when we're looking. I think the way where I am with it is when we're looking to land in some sense of right and wrong,
Mm.
when there is no, I feel like I've approached the limits of right or wrong thinking in my head and had to invert it to go, what is relational? What is the relationship? How do we make it whole? How do we feel whole? How do I need to be in order for you to feel free? And what do I need from you for me to be free?
Yes. It's like the concept of Ubuntu,
Mm.
that I am who I am because you are who you are. We are all part of each other. And that to me, when we come together, and because our liberation is bound up in each other's, that's how we start to get free. We can't do it on our own. We have to do it together.
And I don't think that white supremacy allows for that, because it's a very linear model. It's a very top-down model. It's a very decontextual model. And I don't think patriarchy allows for that,
No.
because patriarchy severs. Patriarchy is about control and domination. So coming back to like interracial sisterhood and, how do we build solidarity in this I am who I am and you are who you are? I think we have to cultivate within ourselves the expansiveness to hold the difference with the other person, to
Mm.
hold difference, and hold space for each other's pain and each other's sovereignty. Like, it's really painful for me to go, wow, Nikki Haley is a sister.
Mm.
Like, that does not, like, I have to really rejigger my internal architecture to make space for that, because it's so much easier. And I've spent several years until, I don't know, this realization is like, what, yesterday, not literally, but psychically it's pretty fresh. It's so much easier because it hurts so much, because I am so against what her behavior, her stance, her values, et cetera, so much easier to go, you know, fuck that shit.
Mm.
Not down with that. She doesn't stand for me. I don't identify with her. That's not that we are not part of the same group. And we are not part of the same group in terms of our orientation and values, and we also are part of the same group. We also have some shared journeys, of like when I came to San Francisco in the 80s, I think it took me like 7 years to explain to anybody what being Indian was. People thought I was Filipino, people thought I was Mexican. They had not seen an Indian person, had not heard of an Indian person. In my high school of 1,600 people, I think there were 4 of us.
Oh my gosh.
It was different because most South Asian Americans emigrated in the 90s.
Mm,
So there is a shared journey, and to make room for that is hard. It's painful to go, there are ways in which I am in a category of identity with someone that I do not resonate with and do not agree with. And how do I hold my membership in this group? This is what we're asking white people to do.
mm,
This is the work of white sisterhood.
yes.
And
That
it's,
we don't turn away and run away from our people, but we stay with our people and collect them and gather our cousins.
yeah. I mean, I've had so many white women go, well, I don't identify with that. I and that's an easy way to disown and disclaim an identity.
Mm,
And it doesn't work because identity is communal. It's not solitary. So in that communal identity, if we are part of it's like it's the whole not all men thing, right? There's a reason that not all men stance doesn't really work. It's not about whether every single man is doing this or that. It's about what does that identity entail, in which case you have to do the hard work of reshaping it, of reforming it, of redefining it, of going, this is what I want it to stand for. And I think I'll just end here is I've been worn down and I still have it in me because it's so much easier, but I've been worn down just standing against stuff over the last few years since 2016. And I am just reaching more and more deeply into what do I stand for and
mm,
how do I embody it and how do I resonate with it? Oh, Sherry's asking a great question here. Why not ask her to hold the space for you? I think that's such a great question, Sherry. And really, it's because I don't think she can. She doesn't have that capacity, and I'm not going to reduce myself down to her small capability when I am so much bigger than her. If
mm.
I have the capacity to hold space for her, then that's what I'm called to do. You know, that's why.
Wow. We were talking yesterday about political leadership and how we're not happy with this binary choice in November, and how we wish there was a leader that was offering the vision that you're talking about, that was offering us something to vote for rather than to vote against. And I said, what we have to do if we want to get there, we have to shift the culture. It's our work to have these conversations, to bring folks together, and to create new patterns of relating across difference as equals. And then, like you said, I need to focus on my stripe of the multiracial coalition, right? And organizing and bringing my people into it. And also then building that interracial solidarity at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't have an answer to it so much as I'm in the journey and I want to be a part of other people in the journey. I've been deeply inspired by Jewish voices making room for Palestinian pain and vice versa. And that's that's where I want to be. That's what I want to cultivate is how do I get bigger to be able to connect more and hold more differentiation without disconnection.
Yes. And if folks are listening and want to come join us in conversation, we're hosting an in-person event next week on Wednesday in San Francisco. And that is the invitation to that event. And we would love for you to come be a part of the conversation. Um, just as we're having today, it will be even more expansive with perspectives from Dominique Hollins, from Carola Ponce, and from everybody who's coming to participate, because it's not just listening to us talk, it's engaging in conversation with each other, which is also a feminist, anti-patriarchal uh, practice, right? There, we all have something to teach and we all have something to learn. And we're so grateful for each of you joining us here today. Do you want to offer any closing remarks?
No, I think I said it all. And please come say your piece and come add your voice next week.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us, everybody. We're grateful. Michelle and Cherie and Desiree. Desiree says, we see this throughout healthcare among providers. Yes, this domination and separation. So let's be the antidote to that by being communal and together.
We'll see you there.
Okay. Bye.